Hi, Peter Boolkah here, and welcome to today's edition of the Transition Guide. Joining me today is Tamsin Woolley-Barker.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Tamsin is the author of a book called Teeming,
Yes.
and was our keynote speaker last year in New Orleans. So, tell us about Teeming. How did Teeming actually happen?
Well, I mean, by training, by education, I'm an evolutionary biologist, an anthropologist. So I was studying human evolution, studying primate evolution, and so I was working following baboons in Africa, basically. And it was these two different species of baboons with totally different social structures, and the rate of evolution was different in those two species. So I was like, what is it about their organization that makes change happen quickly? So fast forward, I end up, executive coaching and working in leadership with all these companies, and I kept seeing the same patterns. CEO is baboon.
I was about to say, there's quite a lot of similarities, really.
There really were, and but I started seeing, how could we make change more quickly, and I could see that innovation structure would work in company as well.
Okay, so tell us about the book. How does the book help businesses?
Right. So, it started, I started a blog, and I was like seeing these patterns, these deep patterns, and I really, went into depth on it. And what I found was that there's 5 broad patterns and 12 simple rules, and that these superorganisms use. So these are structures, these are species where they're very social. So ants, honeybees, where everyone has a different job, and they can't do what they need to do alone. They need everyone, just like a company. So I thought, this has already been solved. Here we are living in this complex world where, something happens over here and it has an unexpected effect over there. Well, these guys have evolved with that for hundreds of millions of years, so they've already solved it. So I thought, let's dive into those deep patterns, try to distill them, and see if we can apply them to companies. And so that's really what the book is about.
And what work do you do with teams?
I have a company called Team Innovation Group, and it works. We do consulting, we do workshops, we work with entrepreneurs, executives, and any kind of change makers that want to see rapid change.
So why do you think we complicate things so much?
Oh, people are just complicated that way. We have so many, we really accomplish the same things that ants do, but we do it with a different processes. We use empathy and deception and dominance and all these other kinds of social things, embarrassment, and we have these at play, but the ants really just leave pheromone trails and act on them. But functionally, it's the same. It's the same kind of things.
So how do you help the companies overcome this? Because there's a lot of interplay here, really, isn't there? I mean, you've got the ego states, of people not being able to let go.
Mm-hmm. So we work. It's really this kind of rippling outward model where you're starting with the individual. How can I be more open, more flexible at myself, and take into account what other people are thinking and those kind of skills. But then the team, and then the organization, and then the wider world, and your community, and how can those little ripple effects add up? So we're looking at it on all different scales. But what we found is that ants and honeybees, they work in these little teams of 3. So one of them is always a leader, and 2 of them are workers. And so it's a modular structure, so they can scale up effortlessly, where they fission and fuse in these modular groups.
But that's very different to the current sort of hierarchical structure that businesses have.
Absolutely, because what they do, if you think about it, 30% of our payroll is spent on the management structure. Mm-hmm. So the more you scale up, the bigger that cost gets. They don't do any of that. What they do is distribute that administration so that each team contains it. So it's distributed. So they don't have any of those costs, and it allows them to be a lot more flexible and modular without those costs.
So I would always have the question asked of me, well, that's all well and good. who manages the teams?
The teams do. Yeah. So it's like a self-organization structure, like they have at Zappos or Gore-Tex.
And how's that work at Zappos? Because I must have been back at Zappos back in 2015 or it was 2016.
Issues.
And that's when they just moved over to this new system.
Yes.
And it was actually interesting to watch. It was like the honeybees were a little bit suicidal and they didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
How does Zappos overcome that?
Well, I think my understanding of what's happened there is that when they put that into place, a lot of the managers, those middle people, had difficulty changing their role. And they had difficulty letting go of that control. But the ones that stayed and did it, so I think they lost like 30% of their workforce.
Which is very unusual.
Yeah, traumatic, really, for the company. But I think now, fast forward, and they're really pretty flexible and agile, and I think it's been a success.
And how they got
that way?
And how they got the people to step up? Because that's probably one of the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs always say is, okay, fair enough, they've got people in their business that just won't step up, and that's why they need managing.
Right, and so this process, what the ants do is mutual accountability. So, a lot of the ants are crummy workers, and that's fine. Maybe 40% of them don't do anything really. They just wait for a need. And that's okay. They still collectively achieve their goals. But in these, when we use the teaming model, we distribute the accountability. So, hey, why are you doing that? Our team has a purpose. The purpose keeps them very oriented, and they check each other.
And you find that people are now open for that check-in?
Yeah, it's definitely a cultural shift to get there because you have to really become like a CEO yourself. You have to take that on. So that means your purpose and your values and your vision have to be really compelling for people to take that on themselves.
Now, when we move to this modular structure, you've seen companies move to this modular structure, ones that you work with. What's the attrition rate like in terms of people? Yeah,
you get a lot of those middle managers are unsettled because they need that control. But so you have to do a certain amount of training and a lot of innovation training around being able to show up authentically, being able to be vulnerable, being able to take that ownership. Not everybody has it in them.
No, and I can imagine the vulnerability being an interesting thing to bring to the UK.
Yeah.
Especially with them being as reserved as they are.
Yeah. So, it remains to be seen how well this translates. But so far it's been...
How have you seen it? You work with companies across the globe. How have other cultures adopted to the whole sort of... Yes.
There's in the Netherlands, like Buurtzorg is using a model that's very similar to this. In fact, it pretty much maps right onto what an ant would do, where they're working in these teams and they're very self-organized and with mutual accountability within the teams, but they have this strong purpose. And the thing is, after that first wave where everybody leaves, that they don't get it, you get people staying really long because they like being part of that really high-performance team.
They probably like being, maybe a lot of them, their own little CEO.
Right, and also, so you stay on that team and your relationships with each other become really important because you got to show up again the next day. So that's the root of that accountability.
And have you seen that? Have you seen a sort of speeding up in scaling of those businesses?
Yes, Buurtzorg has gone from, they started with 70 nurses. It's a healthcare for nursing homes. But, and now they're at 14,000. So in 7 years, they went from 70 nurses to 14,000 nurses because the nurses started jumping ship from the traditional providers. And they don't leave. And they get 400 applications a week.
Really? Yeah. And you've got none of that middle management costs?
Right, none. They have 30 people in headquarters.
Have you seen a reduction in the politics within the organization?
Right, because the way they work is anything that anyone proposes or wants to try, if there's no objections and anyone affected by it, you can go ahead and do it. So it's not, do you think it's a good idea? It's not consensus. It's, do you object?
Okay, that's a different way of looking at it.
And so you make lots of small decisions and you course correct. Well, if the next person says, well, I got an even better idea, then you just change to that. And that's a much more organic, flexible.
And you're using the collective intelligence of the group.
Exactly.
As opposed to an individual way of thinking.
Yeah, and it's a lot like the Stanley McChrystal team of teams model too. In fact, it's really similar.
He
independently came up with nature's solution, basically.
But there's no coincidence there.
Right.
Have you seen the profitability within the companies that have adopted this approach?
Right. So yes, and it's really stunning, the margins, because I know like Sun Hydraulics has this model, and there's a company called FAVI that's a manufacturer, Buurtzorg, but their margins are like 30-35%.
That's unheard of normally.
It's incredible. It's like Silicon Valley levels. And these are manufacturing companies.
That's even more incredible because normally manufacturing companies always bitch and moan about the fact they can't make money.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy when you look at it. And Gore-Tex, has been using that model since the 50s, and they're still around.
And they're doing well. So if people want to know more about what you do and how you do it, where should they go?
Well, you can read my book, which is Teeming, with 2 E's. And you can go to my website, which is teaminnovationgroup.com. And we've got some courses. We're going to have courses through the Growth Institute. And, you're welcome to reach out. Any kind of consulting you need, any kind of guidance, I'm happy to help.
Well, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
If anything we discussed today, we were talking about more agile working, more sort of modular way of working actually, and you're interested in how to explore that further, or you've got any questions, head over to Boolkah.com and get in touch. And remember, failing to learn is learning to fail.